Good afternoon. Welcome to the Weather Guru channel. This is your 2 p.m. update of Hurricane Laura. And Hurricane Laura is holding steady at 75 miles an hour. Pressure at 990 millibars. Is moving still at the west-northwest at 16 miles an hour. So it has slowed down by about 3 to 4 more miles an hour, feeling the effects of the steering currents, that high pressure that's dominant overhead that it's feeling. And so that's what it's feeling. That's the effects that it's feeling from the high pressure steering currents, a weaker high pressure, which is steering it more to the west, a stronger high pressure, which is steering it more to the west than anticipated here. Hurricane warnings and watches have been extended for tomorrow, and I do anticipate this storm to strengthen, but very slowly. It's not going to be an explosion to Category 3 immediately, but the Hurricane Center seems to think that it's going to go to Category 3. I forecasted a Category 2, maybe a 90-mile-an-hour storm, an 85 and a 90-mile-an-hour storm. The reason why is because on the water vapor image here, the dry air that's being entrained into Laura doesn't seem to be letting up. And even though they say it's light shear of only 5 to 10 knots, it still is having an effect on Laura from blasting and being a dynamic system. Also, if you notice, you see the storm clouds trailing behind it. Has great outflow on the southern periphery of the storm, but not that much outflow on the west side and on the southwest side. And there's not an eye developed quite yet. The eye wall is open to the south and it's open to the west, as you can see here on the satellite picture. Now, it does have convection around the center, but it's taking on more of a comma shape, a ragged comma shape appearance with central dense overcast covering up the eye, CDO as they call it. So it kind of has a muddy eye appearance, and so that's strengthening, but it's not a sign of rapid strengthening at all. Now, it will remain a hurricane, obviously, because the water is warm underneath it. Obviously, it's 83 degrees Fahrenheit in the Gulf of Mexico. And I anticipate it to slowly strengthen. I mean, maybe the next advisory at 5 p.m., maybe it'll go up to 80 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour. But this is not a sign of deep strengthening right here, rapid strengthening. And so as a result, we still have a lot of dry air over Texas too. See this dark lines? That's dry air, and it's associated with this trough. So even as it gets closer, as it makes right before landfall, the system should be actually weakening because a lot of the storm tops are going to be sheared off from the top. So tonight into tomorrow will be the maximum winds you would see out of Laura, and that could possibly reach up to 100 miles an hour. But then it's going to be weakening rapidly before landfall as a result of interacting with this trough over Texas and the dry air that's in all of this is dry air in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's running right into that due west into the dry air. So I don't anticipate fast strengthening, and I think the Hurricane Center is going to note that in their report. They've noted the dry air at 2 p.m., but they're going to note it even more in the 5 and 8 p.m. that it's just not going to win out. It's not going to win out with the dry air in place. And the system, see, because the atmosphere is like layers. It's the low level, the mid level, and the upper level. The upper level is favorable. That's why you see these fanning out of the clouds, right? But the mid-level and low level, there's dry air and being entrained into the system. And if you don't have all three levels together in accordance, it's not going to be a favorable environment for the system to just take off rapidly into some Category 3 or 4 monster. So in the short term, it has a couple more hours to strengthen to get to maybe 90, 100 miles an hour. Then after that, this dry air is just going to eat away at this system unless it can reorganize itself and maybe have like an eye wall replacement cycle. But I don't think it will have time for that because it's only about... it's about 480 miles south of the Mississippi River now. So we're looking at landfall sometime on, I believe they said, Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So it doesn't have that much time. So that's the story on Laura. Now, you can see on the satellite here, I'm going to show you there's a movable picture here. And you can see that there's a few clouds. But once again, dry air has been entrained in this system. And, the maximum it can get to at right now, to me, is a Category 2, around 100 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. And even then, it's going to be weakening as it entrains into more dry air. It's going to get entrained into this system. And it's just going to lose its characteristics here as far as being a major hurricane. But it will be a hurricane when it makes landfall. Maybe, Category 1, somewhere between 75 to 90 miles an hour. It's still dangerous storm surge coming in, obviously, because the water's already churned up, appropriately. And so you should not let your guard down. And Houston, the danger is that Houston is going to be more and more in this cone because the system is shifting more and more west. And so Houston will be more and more in this cone, and that's the danger, is that they can have a time of where they can have maybe 4 to 8 hours of hurricane force winds. That's winds greater than 74 miles an hour for a little bit of time, and then it'll subside because the system is moving fast. So that's the danger we have to look out for. Houston having the Category 1 winds coming into Houston. That's the main danger. And of course, everybody knows that anybody to the right and east of the center should be evacuated. If you're right on the coast, obviously, like Cameron, Louisiana, Lake Charles, Beaumont, that the places like that, you probably should evacuate because there's going to be a lot of water push into those areas. The storm surge is still going to be around, I would say about 8 to 10 feet at the maximum to the right of the center, wherever the center makes landfall at. So that's going to be a concern. So that is life-threatening, storm surge. But other than that, the wind shouldn't be too bad outside of the center because the hurricane force winds only extend out. Let's see, I think about 40 miles is the last advisory here. Let's just double check that because I don't want to misquote it here. We can go right here and double check it. The hurricane force winds only extend out 45 miles from the center, okay? So everybody else will be getting tropical storm force winds between 39 and 73 miles an hour, as typical when these systems make landfall. And it also has decreased in size a little bit. So that tells me the dry air is entraining into the system because it was a much bigger system and now it's decreased in size. If you notice the last couple of frames, especially on the northwest side here, up here in the quadrant, the northwest quadrant, is decreased in size. So that means that dry air is eating away at this system slowly but surely, and it's taking foot in this system, and it's never good air. Hurricanes love warm, moist air as well as warm, moist water. You got to have both ingredients in the upper atmosphere, above and below. If either one is missing, then it can't grow into the monster that it loves to grow into. And that's just basic thermodynamics, basic hurricane 101. And so you may have a bunch of thunderstorms around, near the center, but if the center is exposed or the eye wall or eye is open, it's not a closed eye wall circulation, then that's not a good sign for strengthening. So you can have warm water or you can have 100-degree water, but if you don't have a strong organizational mechanics, and I think most meteorologists would agree, if you don't have a strong structure, then there's nothing to build on. So the water can be warm, there can be low shear, there can be all of those things, but if the internal structure of the hurricane is disrupted, it takes a little while for that to come back, just to put it mildly. So I'm not going to get into all of the other complications, but basically just know that the system is moving westward and there is moving more due west of northwest. And so that puts Houston more on the cone. That's what we're more concerned about because it's not so much the rain. Right now they have Houston forecast for maybe 2 inches, 3 inches maximum, but it's going to be the winds and the push of water that could come east of Houston and Galveston Bay that can cause a lot of issues. If this thing comes in closer to Houston, that could put Houston into hurricane force winds easily, within the span of 50 miles. So we'll continue to watch it. By tomorrow morning, they should have the computer models and everything should have a bigger handle on in terms of the actual exact landfall, because these things tend to wobble, like I said, and that's why there's this whole cone of uncertainty and all of that stuff, because it's not exact. The computers do the best they can, but we have to, it wobbles a bit. So now you can see Houston is even more on this western side of the cone here, and if it even tracks even further west, Houston would be right in the bullseye for getting some of those extreme hurricane winds that could approach 100 miles an hour technically, because it is a system out here that's been out here for a while on the Gulf. So just will be on the mindful of that and have your emergency kit ready. Make sure you have, of course, solar powered lights. You don't need candles if necessarily, but have solar powered lights because power will go out. Anything over 45 miles an hour, power is subject to go out. And sometimes the power company cuts them off if they know areas are going to be flooded out, especially if you're right on the coast and you get a storm surge. That's not good to have power lines laying around in the water. So just be mindful of that. And then the system will quickly dissipate later on Thursday night, and Friday it'll be out of your hair. It'll be a sunny day. So just continue to update you. Probably I'll try to do a 5 p.m. update. If not, I'll wait until an 8 p.m. update, and then I'll give you the latest on that. So the main news today is a westward trend continues, and that means Houston is more and more in the cone, and that can be some problems for Houston, a city of 7 million people. So stay tuned, be blessed, and be safe, and I'll talk to you very soon.